Simplicity really is a gift. Life can be dramatic, fast, and full. Sometimes there's a temptation to respond to a complicated moment with complicated solutions. I find that taking a breath and looking for something simple is what clears away the cobwebs. This butter cake is simple, but elegant, rich, and just wonderful. Life can be that way too. I'm Jenny Randolph. Welcome to This Day. So let's jump right into making this caramel butter cake. The first thing that you want to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And that's already done over there. And so the next step is preparing our pan. So I just have a simple bundt pan here, and for this cake, this is going to be your best bet. I've never tried it just as a sheet cake, so if you do try that at home, I can't guarantee that it's going to turn out exactly the way that I usually do it, so I always make this cake in a bundt pan. So we're going to just take some vegetable shortening and just really coat the inside to make sure that nothing sticks. When you're doing this, you want to make sure that you get in all of the crevices and little decorations that they have on there, because that is where your cake is going to stick, and when it comes out, we want it to come out as pretty as possible. This can seem like a tedious task, but it really is important to take a minute and do your prep work. It will make an amazing end result if you just take a second. Now we want to take just a couple of tablespoons of flour, coat our pan, and this is where you're going to really see where you got all of your vegetable shortening. So now that our pan is completely prepared, we're going to just set this to the side and get started mixing our dry ingredients. If you've seen my Facebook or Instagram post, you know that I do a thing called Tip Tuesday. And one of the things that I talked about a couple of weeks ago for Tip Tuesday was how to measure out flour. Now we're using an all-purpose flour today. So we want to measure out 120 grams per cup. And for this recipe, we're going to use 3 cups of flour. So that's 360 grams of flour. Get yourself a little bit of a scale. It is totally worth it. It's going to make your recipes more exact, and it's super easy because you don't have to mess with all of the leveling and making sure it's a full cup. It's always better to weigh out your flour. So I'm going to turn on my scale, and I think that this scale cost me like between $10 and $15, so it was really not anything that's going to break the bank. But again, it's one of those kitchen tools that I use all of the time. So we're going to do 3 cups of flour, which ends up being 360 grams. To our flour, we want to add half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and a full teaspoon of baking powder. I'm gonna give that a good mix. So now that we have all of our dry ingredients, before we get to the wet, I wanted to talk to you about the idea of simplicity. And that is the subject that kind of came up for me when I decided to share with you this recipe of this butter cake, because it really is a simple cake, but it's rich and it's complicated and elegant, and it's perfect for any party. We have a tendency to make things overcomplicated, and we start looking for complicated answers, and we start making our problems a lot more complicated than they need to be. Usually that happens to me when I'm angry with somebody, or I'm trying to get justice, or I feel like I have been wronged. Because, you know, when you're in that headspace, when you're like, oh, so-and-so did that to me, and I really, oh, we need to get back, and they did this and this and this, and you start naming all of these things, and it becomes twisted and complicated and full of anger and full of all of this junk, when the answer can really be quite simple. And usually when I am in that space, what I do is I take a minute and I try to take a breath. And believe me, it's not always easy. I'm not a saint here, and I have my times where sometimes it takes a couple of days. But if you can find a time to take a breath and just in your Whether it's just meditation or just quiet or in your prayer time, whatever it is, if you can find and take a little bit of a breath, the answers always come. And 9 times out of 10, they are simple answers. We get back to the basics and the idea that we are all children of God. We get back to the basic idea of forgiveness. And although these ideas are simple when we talk about them, sometimes when we try to apply them, they can feel tough to do. But the answers really are that simple. Everybody has heard the acronym KISS. And around here, I like to say, keep it simple, sweetie, because in the simplicity, you find peace. So we're gonna get started on our wet ingredients. First thing we wanna do is put 1 cup of butter or 2 sticks of room temperature. And it's really important that it's room temperature because it's not gonna mix right if it's cold, and you definitely don't want it melted. Usually when I know I'm gonna make this cake, I'll put the sticks of butter out the night before. Butter really is pretty safe on all counters. Unless you have a really, really warm home, butter is going to be stable on your counter. It's not gonna go bad overnight. But then the next day, you're all set to go and you don't have to wait for it to come up to room temperature. Now to the butter, we wanna add 2 cups of sugar. So I've used a paddle attachment on this, and we want to cream the butter and the sugar together until they're nice and whipped and light. Now we want to add 1 egg at a time. So that was a total of 4 eggs. Now we want to add a teaspoon of vanilla and give it 1 last mix. I'm going to take a minute and scrape down the sides of the bowl. I find that no matter what mixer that you're using, you always have to scrape down every once in a while. Now we're gonna add our flour mixture and our buttermilk, and we're gonna alternate them. So we're gonna put a little bit of flour in and a little bit of buttermilk and a little bit of flour and a little bit of buttermilk until they're all incorporated and all the ingredients are mixed together. So we'll start with a little bit of flour, maybe about 1/3 of what you have mixed together. A little bit of buttermilk. The reason that we're alternating putting the flour and the buttermilk is to make sure that it's all incorporated so we don't overmix, because you don't want to overmix the flour too much, otherwise it's going to get really tough and you're not going to have that light buttery pound cake that we're looking for. But that's why we do it, so it doesn't get overmixed. And also so that the flour doesn't fly all over the place. I don't know if you've ever done it, but if you've dumped all of the flour in and then you try to mix it and then you have a cloud of white flour all over the place, and now you've aged yourself and it's all over the floor and all over the counters. So there's a couple of reasons why we sort of go slowly and alternate flour and buttermilk. And our last little bit of flour goes in. And our last bit of buttermilk. 1 last mix. I always like to give the mixture 1 last couple of stirs just to make sure I got everything off of the bottom, make sure everything really is incorporated before I put it in my pan. Because this pan is uneven on the bottom, whenever I cook with a bundt pan, I always put it on a cookie sheet because I can get it in and out of the oven a little bit easier. So all I'm doing here is just making sure that it's even all the way around so that it cooks evenly. Also, I don't know if you can see, but I kind of splashed up a little bit here. We want to just take that little bit and make sure it gets down into the batter, because we don't want a burnt piece on the very, very top. So if you did that, and it happens sometimes, just make sure you even it all out so we don't get any of the yucky burnt pieces on top. Now, I always like to give it a little bit of a shake. That way, it gets everything super, super even. Now it's into the oven for 1 hour at 350 degrees. So to make the glaze, we want to start with 1/2 stick of butter, 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of water, and 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. Put it on medium-low heat until it's just come together and mixed. We don't want this to boil. Look how beautiful this turned out. It's golden brown, it smells divine, it's amazing. Now this is what puts the caramel in the caramel butter cake. We're gonna poke a few holes just randomly around the cake, and then that caramel sauce that we made gets poured all over the top. Now we want to let this cool for about 20 minutes before we flip over. So let's just wait that amount of time and we'll flip it over together so you can see what it looks like. So now is the moment of truth, and we're going to flip this onto our tray. So let's take a moment, say a silent prayer, and hope that this doesn't stick anywhere and that it just turns out beautifully. But if it doesn't, you know what? We're just gonna roll with it and it's gonna be fine anyway. Remember, let's keep it simple. Let's not overcomplicate this process. So I'm gonna flip it like this, turn it over. Okay, let's see how this turned out. Oh, that is perfect. We did it, everybody. Look how amazing that is. And our prep work really paid off. Remember at the beginning when we really were putting the vegetable shortening in the flour? Look how pretty this turned out. We don't have any holes anywhere. It really is very beautiful. What a beautiful way to start out our October season. This is gonna be great for any parties or any celebrations that you have. It's perfect for Halloween because it's got the caramel in it. You could even decorate it with apples if you wanted to. Sky's the limit. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you're already subscribed, don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video. I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I do, and I hope that yours turns out just as perfect as this. Remember, keep it easy, keep it simple, and just have fun making this food. We'll see you next time. God bless.